Hey there, writing buddies. Michael here with another video from Mr. Swaim. In our last video, we went over doing critiques for others. In today's video, we're going to be going over how to respond to critiques when someone gives you their input on your writing. I've been having my work critiqued now for a few years, so I understand how vulnerable it can be to put yourself out there like this, but it is definitely a needed step in the writing process, and it will really help you not only just, by them giving you information that you can then implement into your work, but it actually will just make it to where those kind of tips and tricks that they give you will just stick with you while you're writing from there on out. Before I get into the tips on how to respond to critiquing, I do want to kind of go over a little bit of like a mindset that I think we should have before we actually take on these critiques. The first thing is that the purpose of doing this is to show you what is working and what is not working. So you're going to be hearing, some negative things. Just kind of be ready for the downers. That being said, do find a place that you feel comfortable with. I spent a few years at different locations, and I ended up falling into a place called critiquecircle.com, and I really like that place, so I feel more comfortable being there. And that might be how it is for you too. You might go to a place, doesn't really feel right, go to another place, feels better, that kind of thing. So if you're not enjoying your experience, don't think that you have to stay at that place. There's a lot of different locations online where you can have your work critiqued. Remember that you and your writing are not the same thing. Critiques on your writing are not critiques on you as an individual. So even if this topic is something that's near and dear to your heart, even if the writing is something that you've put, we've all put tons of hours into writing, they are not critiquing you. They are critiquing your writing. And it's important to kind of separate the two, at least during this phase of the writing process. Also keep in mind that all writers have gone through this. Everyone that you've ever read has had their work critiqued by someone else. So they have all done this exact same process where they've had people tell them what's working and what's not, and they had a better product at the end. And the last thing, I kind of touched on it before, and that is that this is invaluable to getting this kind of feedback. It's going to make you a better writer. So, even if it's going to be kind of a bit of a trudge, at the end of this journey, you will be better. Before I get into how I handle my feedback, please, if you're enjoying the video, if you find it helpful, leave a like down below. It'll help other people find it as well. Thank you. First tip here is to thank the critiquer for their response. Whether it be a glowing review or a, punch to the gut, it's still important to thank them for taking the time to give you your feedback, right? I mean, if you think that it was malicious, then obviously don't. But in most cases, people who are doing critiques are not being malicious. I think I've only received maybe one out of 5 or 6 years worth of critiques that I feel was a bit more malicious than others. So even though I've had some hard critiques in the past, I still thank those people. Now this doesn't need to be a long or drawn out thank you. It just needs to be a quick, hey, appreciate your feedback, thank you very much. That's it. The reason I suggest doing this though is that it's a mental hurdle that is important to get over. A lot of times in critiques, even critiques that are mainly positive, you are still going to have some things in there where they're telling you, hey, this was not good, right? You're going to get some negative parts of that feedback, even in a very nice review. You make it a habit to give that thank you letter back, then that helps you get over that mental hurdle of, they're wrong, there's no way, everything was good, I can't believe that they said that to me. That hurt that's inside that I've felt before, trust me, giving that thank you letter is a big step in getting over that hurt and just getting on with the project of writing your book. Tip number 2 is try to understand their critique from their perspective. We all see the world through a different lens, and sometimes it's easy to know what you meant when you were writing it, But it's important to remember that they might not know what you meant when you wrote it. So you might get a few different people reading the same paragraph, and they're all reading it differently. In the same vein, they are going to leave a critique for you to read that you might not read quite right either. So it's very much about reading between the lines. It's very much about trying to understand what they were attempting to convey to you, what advice or tip or whatever they were trying to point out, trying to understand what they meant. Whatever it is that they say that you think that they're saying anyways, give the idea a shot in your mind. First off, I would say before you respond to them in any way, give the idea a shot in your mind for a moment. If it makes sense, great, then you probably understood what they meant. If not, then you might not know what they're talking about. After you've given the idea a shot in your mind, go ahead and follow up with them. It's totally okay to ask questions to these critique partners, saying, hey, you know what, you said this about a paragraph I had in here. I'm not quite sure what you meant by that, or I think that you meant this. Is that correct? Asking follow-up questions is completely fine. Now, granted, you might not get an answer. I've asked questions before where no one answered, but most of the time people do respond to questions. Tip number 3 is something you've probably heard before, which is chew the meat and spit the bones. And what this means basically is that, not all critiques are made equal, right? You're gonna have some people who are new at critiquing that might not be very good at articulating their thoughts. You might have people who are not very great at writing, who are giving bad advice. And you might have people who just, give bad advice regardless. But you also have people who are doing a great job, who know exactly what they're talking about, who give you fantastic advice. So not all of the feedback that you're going to be getting is going to be on the same level. Now, in some cases, authors and critique partners who either know what they're doing or might not know what they're doing, I have seen times where I'm either getting this critique back myself or I'm seeing other people get it. And that is when they're putting up a chapter or a couple chapters at a time, and someone points out something that doesn't either make sense, or they say you should cut this doesn't help at all right now. And the payoff happens a few chapters later where, we can't read it just yet because the chapters aren't out yet, right? Obviously, that feedback would not be very useful. We would say, okay, they're telling me to cut this, but I need this in here because down the road it pays off. Great. So how do you deal with that? Well, again, obviously you just put it aside. You can always say no to any level of criticism, any kind of, even if they're being helpful and nice to you, you can always just say like, no, I don't really want to do that. They might suggest a word change. You might say, no, I like the word that I chose there. I like the phrasing. No, I'm not going to do that. You can always say no. But this does go into my next point. Tip number 4 is looking for patterns. So even in that scenario where they are giving you information, they're giving you advice where, you're like, hey, you know what? Obviously it's what I chose I'm either going to keep, or what I chose is not technically wrong because it pays off later or whatnot. It is still important to look for patterns. As an example for me, in one of my starting chapters, I introduce a character named Lepin. And I thought I introduced him very cleverly. I thought I actually did it in a smart way. Kale, my main character, is told by the Masters of the Order to go get all the initiated and send them to the Masters. Through Kale's small little journey, I basically summarize him going from spot to spot throughout the temple and getting all these different initiated, but I don't introduce any of them. The story is I'm summarizing him going from location to location until he gets to the last location where he's going to stay. So I'm slowing the story down now because we're going to stay at this location. And he meets 2 initiated, one of them being this man named Lepin. And I introduce Lepin by name. He's the first initiated that's introduced by name. And I give him a little bit of a description. And so I'm thinking, okay, great. This will clue the reader in that Lepin is someone that they need to know. And Lepin does have to leave. He has a line of dialogue that he has to leave because he needs to go to the Masters. But it's a clue that, hey, this guy is someone that you will want to know because he's going to come up later. Even with all that, that apparently did not work very well. I had a lot of people saying, I don't know who this is. I don't really care right now. which I thought was really weird. And people were also saying like, hey, if this guy's not really a big character or a main character or something like that, probably should just cut it. It doesn't really matter. And I'm thinking to myself, wait, you know, like, he does matter. He doesn't matter right this exact second, but he is going to be someone that is a mainstay, and he has a few lines of dialogue here. So why are people not understanding that he's important? Why is he not, you know, him and the other initiated that I introduced, why are people not understanding that these two are going to be important? That was a little odd to me. So while I knew that I needed to introduce Lepin, I needed to, you know, describe him a little bit, give him a little bit more of an introduction than any of the other initiated, I did realize their critiquing is kind of wrong, but their critiquing as far as, hey, there's an issue going on here, is valid. Out of all their critiques I got, a lot of them, not every single one, but a lot of them were saying that something is wrong here. While they might have been pointing out, you don't need this character, or I don't care who this is right now, whatever they were saying, while that specific might have been incorrect, the feedback of something is wrong here, this doesn't feel quite right, was loud and clear. And so I went in and I updated how I introduced the character to make it more clear that this character is someone that we need to know. On the flip side of that, I also have scenes where people talk about how, you know, how good it was, right? How good the scene worked out. People were, you know, laughing at comedy scenes. They were gasping at, you know, excite scenes, right? Things of that nature. So I have other scenes where I see kind of the inverse, but it's still, I'm getting a lot of feedback from people saying this worked out well, basically, right? And doing that, seeing where the patterns lie, I can say, okay, what I was doing here did not work for most people, but what I was doing over here was working for a lot of people. So it's important that even if their critique is, you know, the specifics of their critique might be wrong, the generality that something might be not right, something might be a little off, look for those patterns, because those will help you find where things are just not quite clicking quite right. Tip number 5 is that you are the author. Never forget that. No matter what anyone says about your story, you are in control of it. If someone gives you a glowing critique and they say, yeah, this was all great, I think you should just change this to this, you can take that or leave it. That's up to you. If someone gives you a massively negative critique and says, you can change all of this, you can cut all of that, you could take that or leave it, right? You can do whatever you want to with these critiques. When they are giving you the feedback, they are not, you have not given control of your work over to them. You are basically saying, hey, what are your thoughts? And then they give you their thoughts, and then you can say, thanks for your thoughts. I'm going to do this, this, and this, but I'm not going to do this, this, and that, right? You don't have to do anything that you don't want to. Receiving feedback and critiques on your writing can feel vulnerable, but as you do it more and more, you're going to find it a very exciting part of the writing process. And a lot of my critique partners out there have really helped motivate me to continue writing. So to all those who have read my work and helped critique, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Let me know down in the comments below what your tips and tricks for responding to critiques are. Have you found the critique experience helpful? Let me know. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any more content. And until next time, happy writing, happy reading.